Volume 1. The Last Page. I've always loved the quiet stillness of the night, the way the world seems to pause and wait for the dawn. That night was no different. It was just me, my laptop, and the infinite abyss of the internet. My insomnia had driven me to the point where surfing through random websites became my nightly ritual. I never imagined that one night this ritual would turn into my worst nightmare. It started like any other night. The soft hum of my laptop was the only sound in my small apartment. I clicked through various forums and obscure blogs, looking for anything to hold my interest. I found myself on a site I'd never seen before, an old-fashioned message board with a black background and neon green text. The site looked like it hadn't been updated since the early 2000s. Curiosity piqued, I began to scroll. The forum topics were bizarre and unsettling. Unsolved murders, cursed objects, real-life hauntings. I clicked on a thread titled The Last Page. It had only one post, and it was from an anonymous user. Do you want to know a secret? Visit http://thelastpage.com, but only if you dare. Despite my better judgment, I copied the link and pasted it into my browser. The page took a while to load, the spinning icon mocking my impatience. When it finally did, the screen went black except for a single line of text. Click to proceed. I hesitated. Something about this felt off, but my curiosity got the better of me. I clicked. The screen flickered and then filled with text, white letters on a black background. The words told the story of a man who had found a strange book that predicted the deaths of everyone he knew. As I read, the air in my apartment seemed to grow colder. My skin prickled with unease, but I couldn't stop reading. Page after page, the story became darker, more personal. It started mentioning details about my life, things no one could know. The scar on my left knee, the name of my childhood dog, even the fight I had with my sister last Christmas. My breath quickened, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly the text stopped mid-sentence. I tried to refresh the page, but nothing happened. I moved the cursor to close the window, but my laptop froze. The screen flickered again and then went completely black. I pressed the power button, but the laptop remained unresponsive. Frustrated and a little scared, I decided to call it a night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. My mind kept replaying the words from the website, the eerie accuracy of the details about my life. I must have fallen asleep eventually because I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing. Groggy, I reached for it. A text message from an unknown number. Did you like the story? I dropped the phone in shock. Who could have sent this? How did they get my number? Before I could think of an answer, another message came through. Look outside. My heart pounded as I slowly approached the window. With trembling hands, I pulled back the curtain. At first, I saw nothing but darkness. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man standing completely still, staring up at my window. His face was obscured by the hood of his black sweatshirt, but I could feel his eyes on me. Panic set in. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but the call wouldn't go through. I tried again, only to be met with the same dead silence. My internet connection was also down. It was as if I had been completely cut off from the outside world. The figure outside moved closer to the building. I ran to my door and locked it, double-checking the windows to make sure they were secure. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crouched behind the couch, my breath shallow and rapid. Minutes felt like hours. Every creak of the old building made me jump. Then I heard it, a soft tapping at my front door. I gripped the knife tighter, my knuckles white. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. I could hear my own heartbeat, the rush of blood in my ears. The door shook as the tapping turned into pounding. "Go away!" I screamed, but the pounding continued. Desperate, I tried the police again. This time, the call went through. I whispered my address to the dispatcher, my voice shaking. She assured me that officers were on their way. Just as suddenly as it started, the pounding stopped. Silence filled the apartment. I stayed behind the couch, clutching the knife, too afraid to move. Minutes later, I heard the faint sound of sirens. A knock on the door made me jump, but this time it was the police. I rushed to open it, relief flooding through me. Two officers stood there looking concerned. I explained what had happened, pointing to the window where I had seen the figure. They searched the building and surrounding area but found no one. They told me to stay with a friend or family member for the night, just to be safe. I nodded, too shaken to argue. I packed a bag and went to my sister's house. She didn't ask many questions, just offered me a place to sleep and a shoulder to lean on. That night, I lay awake, haunted by the thought that someone out there knew everything about me. Days turned into weeks, and the police never found the man or any clues about his identity. My laptop was fried, so I bought a new one, vowing never to visit any obscure websites again. But the damage was done. The feeling of being watched never left me. I moved to a new apartment, changed my number, and deleted all my social media accounts. But sometimes, late at night, I still feel eyes on me. And every so often, I receive a text from an unknown number. Did you like the story? Volume 2. The Night I Fell into the Deep Web. I've been a tech enthusiast, but I never considered myself a hacker or anything close to it. I just enjoyed tinkering with computers, learning about different software, and occasionally diving into the darker corners of the internet. The dark web had always been a topic of fascination for me, but I never had the guts to explore it until that fateful night. It was a chilly Saturday evening and I was home alone. My roommate Alex had gone out of town for the weekend, leaving me with the perfect opportunity to delve into something I'd been curious about for a long time, the deep web. I made myself a strong cup of coffee, fired up my laptop, and connected to the Tor network. My heart pounded with a mix of excitement and fear as I navigated through the onion sites. I started off with some harmless browsing, visiting forums and reading about different topics. But as the night wore on, I grew bolder. I stumbled upon a site called The Abyss, a name that seemed fitting for the dark and twisted place it turned out to be. The homepage was stark, with nothing but a black background and a single line of text. Enter, if you dare. I hesitated for a moment, my finger hovering over the touchpad, but curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on the link and was immediately taken to a chat room. The messages were coming in fast, most of them in languages I didn't understand. I noticed a user named Watcher who seemed to be the moderator. Watcher's messages were cryptic and ominous, filled with warnings and threats. "Welcome to the Abyss," Watcher wrote. "If you're here, it means you're looking for something. But be warned, not everything you find will be to your liking." I typed a hesitant hello into the chat, feeling a strange thrill of danger. Almost immediately, Watcher responded. "Newcomer, I see. Do you know the rules?" I didn't, of course, but I figured admitting that might not be the best idea. "Not really," I typed back. "Care to enlighten me?" "Simple," Watcher replied. "Do not share personal information. Do not ask for personal information. And most importantly, do not try to leave once you've seen what lies here." A chill ran down my spine. The last rule seemed odd, but I brushed it off as part of the site's attempt to scare newcomers. I spent the next hour browsing through different threads, each more disturbing than the last. There were stories of crimes, conspiracy theories, and things that seemed far too real to be fiction. Suddenly, my screen went black. I panicked, thinking my laptop had crashed, but after a few seconds a message appeared in white text. "You have been chosen." Chosen for what? My fingers trembled as I typed a response, but before I could finish, my webcam light flickered on. I hadn't activated it, and a cold wave of fear washed over me. I tried to cover the camera with my hand, but another message appeared. Don't. I froze. Whoever was on the other end could see me, and they knew what I was doing. The messages continued to appear, each one making my heart pound harder. Stay still. We are watching. Images began to flash on my screen, too fast for me to process. Faces, places, gruesome scenes of violence and despair. I wanted to look away, but it felt like my eyes were glued to the screen. A high-pitched ringing started in my ears, growing louder and more painful by the second. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The screen went back to black, and my webcam light turned off. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type, but I managed to send a message to Watcher. What the hell was that? No response. The chat room was completely silent now, the earlier flurry of messages gone. I felt a creeping sense of dread. I had to get out of there. I closed the browser and shut down my laptop, hoping that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of the images from the screen. Faces distorted in pain, eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed on my nightstand. I picked it up and saw an unknown number calling me. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "You shouldn't have done that," a voice whispered. It was distorted, like it was coming through a broken speaker. "We told you not to leave." I hung up, my heart pounding in my chest. How had they gotten my number? I turned my phone off and threw it across the room, feeling a wave of panic wash over me. I knew I needed to get out of my apartment, but where would I go? The next morning, I packed a bag and drove to a hotel on the other side of town. I couldn't stay in my apartment, not after what had happened. I didn't tell Alex anything when he returned. I just said I needed some space. For the next few weeks, I lived in a state of constant fear. Every time my phone rang or I got an email from an unknown sender, I felt a surge of panic. I stopped using my laptop altogether, afraid that somehow they were still watching me. Eventually, the calls and emails stopped, but the fear never really went away. I knew that somewhere out there, people who meant me harm had my information. They had seen me, heard me, and I had no idea what they were capable of. To this day, I can't bring myself to go back to the deep web. The curiosity that once drove me to explore its dark corners has been replaced by a deep, abiding fear. Some doors, I've learned, are better left unopened. Volume 3. The Silent Stalker. I've always been a night owl, often spending my late hours browsing obscure corners of the internet. The quiet of the night, when everyone else is asleep, gives a serene atmosphere to the glow of my computer screen. One evening, as the clock ticked past 2 a.m., I stumbled upon a forum dedicated to urban legends and creepy tales. I thought it would be fun to delve into some spine-chilling stories to pass the time. The forum was full of the usual ghost stories and folklore, but one thread caught my eye. It was titled, "The Silent Stalker." The original poster claimed that this was not just a story but a real occurrence that had happened to them and a few others they knew. Intrigued, I clicked on it and began to read. The post described how people had been receiving strange messages online from an unknown sender. These messages were not your typical spam or phishing attempts. They were detailed and personalized, mentioning specifics about the recipient's life that only someone close to them could know. The messages always ended with a chilling phrase, "I am watching you." Skeptical but curious, I scrolled down to the comments section. Numerous users shared similar experiences, all beginning with seemingly innocuous messages that escalated to deeply personal and threatening ones. Many of them had tried to block the sender, change their passwords, even get new devices, but the messages persisted. Feeling a shiver down my spine, I decided to test the waters. Using a throwaway email account, I posted a reply under the thread, half-jokingly asking, "What does it take to get a message from this silent stalker? Is it real or just a bunch of overactive imaginations?" I expected either silence or a slew of prank responses, but instead, I got a direct message almost immediately. The subject line was blank, and the body of the email contained only one sentence: "Careful what you wish for." The email address was an unrecognizable jumble of letters and numbers, clearly a bot-generated one. I shrugged it off, attributing it to an overzealous forum troll. I closed my laptop and went to bed, the eerie message soon forgotten as sleep took over. A few nights later, I was working late again, lost in a sea of tabs and random internet searches when my phone buzzed. It was an email notification from my personal account. Confused, I opened it. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the subject line: "I am watching you." The body of the email was a detailed description of my activities over the past few days. It mentioned the exact time I left my house, where I went, and even what I was wearing. Panic set in as I read the final sentence: "Look outside your window." Against my better judgment, I got up and approached the window, peeking through the blinds. At first, I saw nothing but the dark, empty street. Then, a faint movement caught my eye. A figure stood under the streetlight, half hidden in shadow, staring directly at my house. I quickly closed the blinds and retreated to the safety of my room, my mind racing. How could someone know so much about my life? I lived alone and kept to myself. I decided not to engage further. Ignoring it would be the best option. I changed my email passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, and hoped that would be the end of it. The next few nights were uneventful, and I started to relax, thinking it had been a one-time scare. But then the messages started coming again, this time to my phone. Texts from an unknown number detailing my daily routine, places I visited, conversations I had. It felt like someone was always watching, always listening. I went to the police, but there was little they could do with just anonymous messages. I even considered moving, but the thought of uprooting my life over what might be an elaborate prank seemed extreme. Yet the fear was real, and it gnawed at me constantly. One night, as I sat in my living room trying to distract myself with a movie, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo. It showed me sitting on my couch, the same couch I was on at that very moment. My blood ran cold. I looked around, trying to find the source. There, peeking through a crack in my curtains, was a small camera lens. My fear turned to anger. I stormed outside, ripping the camera from its hiding spot and scanning the area for any sign of the stalker. The street was empty, eerily quiet. I went back inside and called the police again, this time with evidence. They promised to send a patrol car to monitor my house, but their assurances did little to calm my nerves. The final straw came a few nights later. I was awakened by a loud bang, like a door slamming shut. Heart pounding, I grabbed a baseball bat and crept downstairs. The front door was wide open, swaying in the night breeze. On the floor was a single sheet of paper with one sentence scrawled on it: "You can't hide from me." That was it. I packed a bag and left that night, staying with a friend on the other side of town. I quit my job, moved to a new city, and changed my number. It took months before I started to feel safe again, constantly looking over my shoulder, always aware of my surroundings. Even now, as I write this, I can't shake the feeling that someone is out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The silent stalker may have lost my trail, but the terror they instilled in me will never fade. I live my life in fear, knowing that the internet, the thing I once loved, has brought this horror into my life. And if they find me again, I don't know what I'll do.